That was probably the most famous picnic in the history of the world. Probably the biggest, too. That event is recorded 6 times in the New Testament. Twice in Matthew, twice in Mark, once in Luke, and once in John. That would seem to indicate that the Christian writers who handed down the tradition of Jesus to us thought that it was rather important. And it is rather important. Because in a sense, it sums up everything that Jesus is about. Notice and this is a long chapter. You're going to be hearing this chapter piece by piece for the next few Sundays. And it's interesting to watch the progression. Try to remember what happened the Sunday before. Here we find Jesus with a group of hungry people, and he satisfies their hunger, their physical hunger. Next week, following, he will say, I am the bread of life. I am the satisfaction of your deepest hunger, your deepest yearnings. And then finally, at the very end of this chapter 6 of St. John, he begins to talk about the Eucharist as the bread which is himself. This whole chapter is not about the Eucharist. It's about Christ satisfying the hunger of the world, beginning with physical hunger. And that progression from physical hunger to spiritual need to the Eucharist is completely reversed by what we do here on Sunday morning. We gather for the part which says, this is Jesus, this bread. And then we go out and satisfy the hunger of the world, both the spiritual hunger and, as the Pope has recently reminded us, the physical hunger of the world. It's a wonderful reverse progression. Jesus came that we may have life and have it to the full, he said. And full life, full human life, doesn't mean just being good so I can get to heaven. It means flourishing now as a human person. And with all that flourishing means, it means relationships, it means love, affection, it means physical needs being satisfied. And what we are experiencing and beginning to know more clearly in our own time is that these needs are not being satisfied for many, many people, perhaps the majority of the people on God's planet Earth. Because what he gave us to flourish was meant for all. And so as we come to Eucharist every Sunday, we're not coming just to satisfy our own spiritual needs and hunger, but to be strengthened to take care of the needs of our brothers and sisters, whether they are spiritual or material. That's what this is all about, this Lord's Supper. It isn't a private tete-a-tete with Jesus. It's an experience of the people of God together celebrating the Lord's presence among them in many ways, the Word, the sacrament, and in each other, and then going from here to do what Jesus wants us to do. Did you ever ask yourself the question, why is Mass over so abruptly? We had this long build-up to communion, and then boom, one prayer, and goodbye. Because, and we have to remember our Latin here, the word Mass comes from what the priest says to us right at the end of that final prayer, that little prayer at the end after communion. He used to say, ite missa est. Missa is where we get the word Mass. And what does that mean? It means go, you're sent. You're sent from this table to go out to take care of the hungers of the world. And I think when the Pope comes to our country in a couple of weeks, he's going to remind us that this relationship with Jesus and relationship among ourselves is not just spiritual. He's not coming to blame anybody for the hungers of the world, especially the material hungers. But he is coming to remind us that there are hungers, and that these hungers are probably caused not by personal malice on our part, but by systemic greed in the way we deal with each other on the larger scale. I can't fix it. You can't fix it. But we're all involved in a system of inequality and harm. And it needs to be fixed. And if Jesus came that we are to flourish and wants us to help people to flourish, we have to enter into those areas as well. You can't keep your relationship with Jesus purely on the spiritual level. You can't keep your relationship with your family purely on the spiritual level. You got to feed them, clothe them, air condition them. All right? It's the same for the Christian people. We have to take care of brothers and sisters on the planet. Will everybody have enough and everybody be equal? It'll never happen. And that's not a sin, that it never happens. But it is a sin if there are people who have nothing.